Good morning. At the White House this week, the president begins with a mental health summit that will take place tomorrow, and on Tuesday, President Obama will host the president of Chile. And then later in the week, he travels to the West Coast with a stop in Palm Springs to have 2 days of meetings with President Xi Jinping of China. Meanwhile, Congress returns this week as well with another round of focus on the IRS investigation. Good morning. It is Sunday, June 2nd, and we're going to begin with Congress's return. Bob Cusack of the Hill newspaper will be joining us in just a moment. As always, our phone lines are open at 202-585-3881, our line for Republicans, and 202-585-3880 for Democrats. We also have a line for independents, and we welcome your emails at journal@cspan.org. You can also join us on our Facebook page at twitter.com/cspanwj, or send us a tweet at cspanwj. Let's begin, though, with the front page story of the New York Times and the meeting that will be taking place between the president and President Xi Jinping of China. The story from David Sanger of the New York Times with this headline: U.S. and China will hold talks about hacking. The piece points out that the United States and China have agreed to hold regular high-level talks on how to set standards of behavior for cybersecurity and commercial espionage, the first diplomatic effort to diffuse the tensions over what the U.S. says is a daily barrage of computer break-ins and theft of corporate and government secrets. That story this morning, front page of the New York Times. By the way, the Defense Secretary Chuck Hagel also speaking about that over the weekend as he traveled to Asia. But let's begin with Congress returning this week and the headline from thehill.com: some court challenges could tear down major pieces of Obamacare. The piece by Sam Baker points out that the president's health care law is under attack in the courts, even as the administration sprints toward its full implementation. Bob Cusack is the managing editor of the Hill newspaper, joining us live on the phone. Good morning. Thanks very much for being with us.
Good morning, Steve.
A busy week. Let's begin, though, with this headline from your colleague Sam Baker. What's this all about?
Well, these are basically makes the case that legal challenges to Obamacare are not finished, and there are really a handful of lawsuits, some in the pipeline that are closer to getting to the higher courts than others. But they focus on the IRS setting up insurance programs, which is kind of a concern even for supporters of Obamacare, that if that ever got to the Supreme Court, that could be struck down. Obviously, the IRS has been in the news recently. And then there's another lawsuit on the birth control provisions. And then a couple other issues that are in the pipeline, but probably those are court battles that are beyond those two that are going to take probably more than a year to get to. But the legal challenges of Obamacare are still ongoing.
And there's one point from this story which also gets to what Congress is going to be focusing on this week with regard to the IRS, pointing out that one lawsuit accusing the IRS of illegally implementing these new subsidies to help people buy insurance. And of course, as you and others are pointing out, 2 new days of hearings on the IRS this week.
Yeah, that's right. Danny Werfel, the acting IRS commissioner, will be testifying before the House Appropriations Committee just tomorrow. And then that's just the beginning of the hearings. The Ways and Means Committee in the House will be hearing from conservative groups and their experience of being targeted by the IRS. And then later in the week, we have Darrell Iss's Oversight Committee will be highlighting a new audit, more trouble for the IRS, about conference spending by the agency that Danny Werfel, the IRS acting commissioner, has already said was inappropriate. So we'll be getting more details on how much spending, how much wasteful spending was spent on these conferences later this week. But clearly, one of the focus this week will be on the IRS.
In fact, Danny Werfel called that part of the legacy from a previous era, putting blame in part on the Bush administration.
Yes. So it goes back a long time, and that's Werfel's message that there's a lot to be done at the IRS. There's a lot of reforms that have to be implemented that are just not tied to Obama administration tenure.
Another story from your colleague Jennifer Martinez with the headline: lawmakers press the president to get tough on China with regard to hacking. And again, this story available online at thehill.com. And one key player in this is Congressman Mike Rogers of Michigan, who's calling on the president to explicitly warn the Chinese president that cyber attacks waged by his country's government and military will not be tolerated by the U.S. And these comments from over the weekend of Defense Secretary Chuck Hagel, Bob Cusack, who was in Singapore, again accusing China of cyber espionage, drawing some sharp responses from the Chinese government.
Yes, this could be really a bit of an awkward meeting between the president and a Chinese leader because clearly the U.S. government believes it has enough proof that over the years that the Chinese government has been involved in these hacking incidents. So the fact that they might be setting up some type of new memorandum or some type of new process where certain things are not allowed formally is an indication that there could be progress. But this is going to be an awkward meeting because the Chinese government has denied what the U.S. is alleging.
Some other things to look for this week. First of all, July 1st is the deadline before student loan rates increase. We heard from the president on Friday at the White House. Congress is under the gun to do something, correct?
Absolutely, and this sounds familiar. It is, because about a year ago, Democrats in Congress and President Obama challenged Republicans to keep the rates at 3.4%, and Republicans didn't like the Democratic remedy, but under political pressure, they caved. Now, Republicans are saying, we're not going to cave this year. They want to tie the rates not to an artificial number like 3.4%. They have passed legislation in the House, mostly along party lines, that would tie it more to market rates. That has drawn a White House veto, and Senate Democrats are working on their own bill that they hope to get to this week that would freeze the rate at 3.4% for 2 years. They say the House version would simply raise rates, and that's what Democrats, they say they don't want to do that, and they say they're going to stand strong. So, you know, between now and July 1st, there's going to be a lot of jockeying on that.
We're talking with Bob Cusack, who is the managing editor of the Hill newspaper. A couple of other agenda items before we let you go. First of all, the Farm Bill. Where does that stand in the Senate and also work in the House?
Well, in the Farm Bill, a bipartisan bill, that's going to be the first thing that the Senate addresses this week. They started before the last recess. They're going to be working through various amendments. That is a bipartisan bill. That is expected to pass the Senate. Now, it passed the Senate last year, but didn't get it got out of committee in the House, but not on the floor. Now, if you talk to House members who are pushing the Farm Bill, they are optimistic that they're going to get a floor vote, and House leadership has indicated there will be a floor vote. And a lot of the controversy between the Senate version and the House version goes to what's called SNAP, and those are food stamp programs and the allotment for funding in those bills. Very different, and conservatives really want to ratchet that number down. So there's more hope that a farm bill could be signed into law this year or perhaps into early next year, but there's a long way to go.
And a major centerpiece of the president's agenda remains immigration. We saw what happened before the Senate Judiciary Committee, and we've talked to Congressman Bob Goodlatte, who's the chair of the House Judiciary Committee. Two different approaches on this legislation in each chamber.
Yes, very much so. The Senate Judiciary Committee has reported out a bipartisan bill, 13-5. That bill is probably going to go on the Senate floor next week. Conservative critics of that are planning, they tell us, to really ramp up their opposition to that. But will it pass the Senate? In all likelihood, it will. Then the focus is on the House, and there's a bipartisan group in the House that has struggled to get a bill. They say they're getting very close to releasing a bill that would move through Bob Goodlatte's Judiciary Committee. But, you know, in talking to various House conservatives, they don't like that Senate bill at all. And they are saying no matter what the Senate does, the House is not going to pass that bill. And that's something that Speaker John Boehner has said. And I think that's right. Unless there's enormous political pressure over 2 or 3 months, the House is just not going to take up the Senate bill. So they're going to either move this bipartisan House bill from this gang in the House, if they ever come up with a bill, or Bob Goodlatte is going to move a series of individual bills through his committee and then on the floor. And I think one area where you see the House move is that they're not going to vote on one big bill like the Senate. They're going to vote on very narrow bills, and then they'll get into conference, and then that's when the real battle will begin. And if it ever gets out of conference, then there'll be, of course, another vote in the House and Senate to see if it can get to President Obama's desk.
And two political notes from your colleague Alexandra Jaffe about Mitt Romney trying to resurface again in 2014 and remain relevant among Republican Party circles. Could we see him on the campaign trail for the upcoming midterm elections, or will he just be a behind-the-scenes player raising money?
Well, I mean, certainly he's very good at raising money. There's no doubt about it. He is a big name, but after the 2012 election, which of course he lost, he did say, "I'm just not going to go away." I think that and the candidates that want his help will ask for it, especially on the money side. I don't think you're going to see him everywhere in every kind of campaign across the country. Certainly, President Obama and maybe perhaps more Michelle Obama is going to be on the campaign trail more than Romney, But I think that if candidates want Romney, he clearly is indicating that he'll show up.
And as we begin a new month on this June 2nd, eyes on a special election at the end of the month, June 25th in Massachusetts. A special election to replace now Secretary of State John Kerry. And from the Hill newspaper, Senator McConnell saying that Gabe Gomez is key for the Republicans retaking the U.S. Senate in a tough race against Congressman Ed Markey. What are you looking at?
Well, this race, of course, is going to get nastier as we get closer to the election. Markey, a veteran of the House, he is basically the favorite, but he's not a huge favorite. So that's where Republicans think they can pull another type of Scott Brown. Now, Gomez has not said he's another Scott Brown. He says, "I'm my own person." It's actually interesting that Ed Markey in various interviews has compared himself sometimes to Ed Markey, to Scott Brown, to try to get the independent vote. So this is key. Remember that Senate Republicans need 6 seats to take back the majority. And as Mitch McConnell is indicating, this is a key race and would give them huge momentum should they pull off the upset. And there's no doubt about it that Republicans winning in Massachusetts would be an upset, just like Scott Brown was.
Bob Cusack, who is the managing editor of the Hill newspaper, thanks very much for being with us as Congress returns this week. We appreciate your time.
Thanks, Steve. I appreciate it.
We want to get to your calls and comments. You can also join us on our Facebook page or send us a tweet. The phone numbers are on your screen, and we do have a line for those of you watching outside the United States. That number is 202-585-3883. In his weekly address, the president talked about Congress coming back this week.
Members of Congress will be coming back next week for an important month of work. We've got to keep this progress going until middle-class families start regaining that sense of security. And we can't let partisan politics get in the way. Congress should pass a law giving every responsible homeowner the chance to save about $3,000 a year on their mortgage by refinancing at historically low interest rates. Congress should put more Americans to work rebuilding our crumbling roads and bridges, like the one that collapsed last week in Washington State. We'd all be safer, and the unemployment rate would fall faster. And Congress should fix our broken immigration system by passing common sense reform that continues to strengthen our borders, hold employers accountable, and provides a pathway to earn citizenship. And also modernizes our legal immigration system so that we're reuniting families and attracting the highly skilled entrepreneurs and engineers who will help our economy grow.
The president, in his weekly address, some of you are already weighing in on our Facebook page, including this from Richard Smith, who said, with Congress returning this week, quote, "I expect a lot of hearings, lots of lying to Congress. I expect folks to get thrown under the bus. I expect I don't know, I can't recall, it was not my job, I was not informed," and other foolish excuses for the country going to hell and blaming anyone but the people in power. Larry is joining us from Hernando, Mississippi, Democrats line. Good morning.
Good morning, Steve. Could you get Lawrence O'Donnell on your show?
Sure.
I wish you would do that so he could explain what the Republican Congress did in 1954 to change 501c4s. You had to qualify to be a 501c4 exclusively a welfare group, social group. And the Republican Congress changed it so they could help big business and their rich friends get tax breaks. And that's just pitiful. So I blame Congress for what's going on at the IRS instead of the IRS workers. So I wish you would get Lawrence O'Donnell on there so he can explain it to these people. And any of the people in Congress didn't even know it.
Okay. Larry, thanks for the call. Appreciate it. Bill has a follow-up on your point. On our Twitter page, he says, by a margin of 60% to 34%, Americans believe the IRS frequently abuses its power. That according to a recent Gallup poll. And Chardon Miller has this on our Facebook page. I expect the lies to continue, and I expect the lobbying to continue, or should that be more correctly be referred to as bribery? and I expect the people that fall for the lies to continue falling for them. Our next call is Nick, joining us from Pleasanton, California. Republican line, good morning.
Good morning. I haven't been watching much lately because I'm sick and tired of all the bull put on. Anyhow, I'm really upset with the House and the Senate trying to pass an immigration bill. They're all mostly concerned with what they want and what the party wants. The country is secondary. They all want their party to get the credit for whatever takes place, and the Republicans don't want anything unless it's what they want. I'm a Republican, but the Republican Party does not determine how I feel about things. And it's really sickening the way the House and the Senate try to pass bills, and it's all secret until the last minute, and the public hears very little about the bills. It's all talking points.
Okay, Nick,
Thank
thanks
you.
for the call from California on our Republican line. On our independent line, Richard is joining us, Lake Placid, Florida. Good morning.
Yes, good morning, Steve. I don't expect incoming Congress to do anything significant. They're going to kick the can down the road. They can't fix problems. In fact, nothing will get fixed. We'll see the same issues, immigration, tax reform, health care, all of these wars that we're involved in. All this will remain until we get rid of at least 50%, maybe 75% of our elected leaders, and put in people who are leaders that will protect the people and enforce the Constitution. They've gotten so far away from the Constitution that they just laugh at it and ignore it right now. What's going on with all of these hoaxes, and that's what they are, health care, and Benghazi, they're just distractors from the people so that the power can remain in Washington.
Richard, thanks for the call. Joseph Ramirez on our Twitter page says the GOP disappointed that the deficit is now the lowest it has been since World War II. This ruins their day. And many of you following up on our Facebook page, let me share with you 3 of the comments. First from Tracy, who says she's expecting more obstructionism and gridlock, certainly nothing about jobs that House Republicans ran on in 2010. From Adam Michael, I fully expect Ted Cruz, Rand Paul, Mike Lee, and Marco Rubio to keep blocking the unanimous consent agreement to go to conference to work on the budget resolution. They can't use it as a political football anymore, so that they will continue to block the budget resolution. And Jacqueline Cook says, I hope they get something done for a change. We the people are tired of the obstruction, and perhaps heads need to roll come election time. Just some of you sharing with your thoughts in comments. You can do so on our Facebook page at facebook.com/cspan. Gilbert is joining us from Birmingham, Alabama. Good morning, Independent Line.
Good morning. Yes, good morning to C-SPAN. First of all, my heartfelt prayers goes out to my fellow citizens in Oklahoma and the disaster. You know, I'm really concerned about that matter. But concerning the matter of this hacking with China, I find it quite amazing that we as a nation can't seem to figure out that we profess to be a God-fearing nation, and we're dealing with a state-run communist country. Now, China's track record is that they say one thing and do whatever they want to do. And right now, those of us who've been keeping up with the news, you know, the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal, they've been writing a lot of articles concerning the buildup, the military buildup of China. Now, I feel that Congress, the president, and the people of this country should take this hacking matter very serious. And if we don't do this and try to protect our nation, what kind of nation have we become? It's quite appalling that we could allow our country to be bought out like the Smithfield, a meat packing country, and everything is in China. And now we got the challenger country hacking our military.
Gilbert, thanks for the call. And again, that will be a topic of discussion. The story this morning is front page of the New York Times as the president travels to Palm Springs, California. By the way, coming up later in this program, We'll give you some insight into the specific location where this meeting will be taking place with the president's counterpart, the president of China. Also, while in Southern California, the president will be in Los Angeles for a fundraiser. A busy week, though, as Congress returns, and we're focusing on that here on C-SPAN's Washington Journal for the Sunday morning. The cover story of CQ Weekly looking at an issue that continues to hit home for many Americans, sequestration. It's titled The Inevitable Sequester Sequel. Meanwhile, Niels Lesniewski of CQ Roll Call writes about the return of Congress and a memo that was sent late last week by the House Republican leader Eric Cantor of Virginia, pointing out that Congressman Cantor circulated this memo on Friday afternoon, outlining a busy schedule for the chamber's June work period. The Virginia Republicans said that the chamber will turn an assortment of legislative measures, including 4 fiscal 2014 appropriation bills. Those measures fund a handful of departments and agencies, including the Agriculture Department, Homeland Security, Defense and Veterans Affairs, along with some other federal functions such as the Food and Drug Administration. Spending bills are also being written on the $967 billion level that includes the budget's sequester effects in baseline. In addition, as we talked earlier with Bob Cusack of the Hill newspaper, the Farm Bill is on track to actually reach the House floor this year. The Agriculture Committee reported out a bill just before the Memorial Day recess. Now, let me go back, though, to the CQ Weekly cover story on sequestration and share with you just some of the details. It's titled, Stuck on Sequester. The impact of automatic spending cuts seems to give Congress incentives for a deal, but so far, lawmakers look content to live with the consequences. The piece points out that the sequester was allowed to happen 3 months ago, and federal employees are being furloughed, medical research grants are being frozen, classrooms are being backed by Head Starts have been forced to close, Navy ships moored and fighter jets grounded, with no sign that lawmakers will reverse the current sequester. Congress is now setting off to make appropriations for fiscal 2014 on a path that is paved with more legislative friction. The story also points out that House Republicans, Senate Democrats, and the White House are all ignoring spending caps set in law to avoid the political pain of specifying the cuts needed to meet the spending caps under the debt limit law. Unless Washington changes course, writes CQ Weekly, the result almost certainly will be another round of across-the-board reductions in military and domestic programs that many say would damage the recovery, weaken national security, and wreak havoc on government agencies. Again, that story this morning, front page of the cover story of CQ Weekly. Frank is joining us from Longview, Texas, Republican line, as Congress prepares to return this week with a busy month of June and July. Good morning, Frank.
Morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
Fine, thank you. How are you?
Thanks for accepting my call. It's been a while since I got called, and I sure appreciate it. Now, this is Congress and House. It's been going on for years like this. A lot of them are just a bunch of jerks up there. They're old cronies, and I'm an old crony at 77. And, they need to step by and let the younger generation that are smart get with it. And there's a trend right now. Everybody's quitting, not going. Bachman, for one. I don't know. I hope she runs for president. But anyway, on the sequencer, it's not working. He bailed out General Motors, okay? The last month, what General Motors is doing? They're going to China. It's ridiculous. I bought my last GM car, and I've been a GM person for years. And it's just not we're in a situation now to where, these foreign countries are taking us over.
Frank, thanks for the call. Appreciate it. On the Republican line, Ron Fournier, who is the editorial director of National Journal, has a piece somewhat along those lines, focusing on the middle class as Wall Street continues to see record highs over the last couple of weeks. The middle class falls, Wall Street rises, and Washington dithers. That's the story from Ron Fournier of National Journal as Michael joins us from Delray Beach, Florida. Good morning, Democrats line.
Hi, thank you very much for having me on.
Certainly.
I'm watching the rebroadcast on XM 124, so big thanks to XM Radio.
And we're heard on XM channel 119, so thanks for listening. Go ahead, Michael.
Oh, okay. It's great. I wanted to, just touch on a point that Michael Smerconish, on XM 124 has been bringing up a lot recently, and I really think it's the root of all the issues that we've been discussing is campaign finance reform. and a system that causes our political leaders to no longer be delegates of the authority of their constituents, and really just concerned more about fundraising because of kind of the endless rat race they need to participate in to ever be reelected. I mean, it's just become so expensive. I think it's just become so systemic and just completely degraded the entire political process. And I really believe that the idea of an open primary, where the top two candidates as voted on by all constituents in a district, as opposed to only Democrats or only Republicans being able to vote in specific primaries, which creates more of a partisan system, along with campaign finance reform and unlimited spending, I think really will create a situation where more of these issues can be more easily tackled or solved.
Okay, Michael, thanks for the call. A follow-up to an earlier tweet about the deficit. One of our viewers saying, where do you people get information that the deficit is the lowest since World War II? Crazy talk, although some referring to the deficit as a percentage overall of the GDP, which is what the White House was referring to when some new deficit numbers came out late last month. Laura is joining us from Troy, Michigan, Republican line, as Congress prepares to return this week following the Memorial Day break. What's on your mind, Laura?
Well, what's on my mind is how self-serving the people are in Congress. When they had a problem with the airports, they wanted to get home. Immediately, that was taken care of. Then the Republicans were after the president to present a budget. Well, he's presented a budget. Nothing's been done. It's just put on the back shelf. It's really quite disgusting. I am an ex-Republican, I might add. And to the gentleman in Texas who was talking about China with General Motors going there, sir, they've been there for 15 years. You know, I wish people would pay attention to what's going on instead of just voicing mindless and correct information. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for the call this morning. In the op-ed page of the Washington Post, Senator Barbara Mikulski, who is the chair of the Senate Appropriations Committee, has this piece, Death by a Trillion Cuts. The sequester risks every aspect of our nation's future. As Bob Cusack of the Hill newspaper indicated, tomorrow and Tuesday, the IRS will be front and center again with another round of hearings. And in advance of that, the Republican National Committee with this new web video taking aim at the president and members of his cabinet.
I first learned about it from the same news reports that I think most people learned about this. I think it was on Friday.
What day did you learn?
The same day the president did.
From news reports?
Correct.
So no one in this building told you?
That's correct.
Okay. Who was responsible?
I don't have that name, sir. I don't remember, to be honest with you. I'm not sure what you're asking, sir.
Don't remember again.
I'm not there to go ask a set of questions of people, what happened, when, who, and how.
But that's the first we've heard of it.
Why they didn't, I don't know.
No one in the White House was aware.
This happened on my watch. I do not accept responsibilities for all the actions.
But I did not know any of the details at that time?
I wouldn't say nobody's saying that, but or at least suggesting it.
With all due respect, you were there, though.
No, I was there.
I've decided to follow my counsel's advice and not testify or answer any of the questions today.
What day did the conversation take place?
I'd have to look back at my notes on that, sir.
You've got notes on that?
I'd have to try to find them.
Do you have notes or don't you have notes?
I don't know.
I first learned about it from the same news report.
I have not done anything wrong.
What I continue to believe is that ultimately the buck stops with me. I'm going to be accountable.
That from the Republican National Committee. Again, more on the IRS this week, and a front page story below the fold by Peter Baker and his colleagues of the New York Times. Seeking a fresh start, Holder finds a fresh set of troubles. Let me share with you just part of what they write this morning. At the end of last year, with the election decided and the Obama administration in office for more than 4 years, Attorney General Eric Holder considered stepping down. He decided against it in part because before he left, he wanted to move beyond the disputes that had characterized his tenure, accomplish some of the goals he had set for the job, and leave on his own terms. If Mr. Holder really thought he could escape controversy, the last few weeks have reinforced how inescapable controversy has become for the nation's chief law enforcement officer. A furor over tactics in leak investigations, including secretly obtaining phone logs for reporters at the Associated Press and Fox News, has again engulfed the Attorney General in allegations, investigations, and renewed calls for his resignation. Our next call is George joining us from Sykesville, Maryland. Independent Line. Congress returning this week. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. The American public has put up with some disheartening natural disasters, floods, and tornadoes, and their spirits being drained by weather events. Now, next week, an unnatural disaster occurs. A group of millionaires and narcissists are coming back into Washington, D.C. and getting FaceTime on television. And that's essentially what they're about. They want to have their faces on television, their words pontificating to us, and they actually get nothing done. The rate of poverty for children in this country is a shame. The rate of joblessness is a shame. These people, if they had any shame, would take care of joblessness and poverty. But they love wealth so much. They have so shallow a spiritual life. They'd rather spend their time arguing amongst each other about who gets to brag, who gets the most time on television. It is a shame.
George, thanks for the call. Independent Line. Arnold has this point with regard to the Attorney General, Eric Holder. He says simply, Holder needs to go. You can join us on our Twitter page at twitter.com/C-SPAN, or Twitter at C-SPAN-WJ. You can also join us on Facebook as well. Front page of the Washington Post. If you go to a commissary, this is a story you might want to read. It's titled Costs and Benefits, the Backlash Over a Plan to Close Some of the Base Supermarkets. It shows just how difficult it is in reining military spending related to personnel. And there is one example from the Jump page in terms of shopping for groceries. Giant, which is a grocery chain in the Middle Atlantic area, including here in Washington, D.C. The same items at the commissary total at $44.89 compared to $66.70 at the Giant supermarket. Some, including Walmart, have said that they will offer the same discount to military veterans if they travel to Walmart, including some that are just a few miles away. But the story also pointing out that the government looking at trying to privatize some of the commissaries and the challenges that it faces in doing so. Again, that story this morning, front page and inside the Washington Post. Linda is joining us next from Minneapolis, Republican Line. Good morning.
Good morning.
How are you today?
The reason I'm calling is because of regarding infrastructure. What happened in Seattle reminded me of what happened in Minnesota a couple of years ago. I don't understand what Congress does anymore. If you read the Constitution, what their job is supposed to be, their job is to go there, represent the people, government of the people, for the people, by the people. These people go to Washington, all they do is go on TV and talk nonsense. We need people who can go and do their job. And I'm sick and tired of, I don't care if it's a Democrat or Republican or whatever, but the Republicans need to do their job. You're elected to do the job to serve the people, not to go there and talk about nonsense we don't care about. Do your job to create jobs for people. We need to fix our infrastructure so that we're still number one in the world.
Okay.
Don't talk about nonsense. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Republican Line, Minneapolis. And Edwin says on our Twitter page, as an independent, I would like to see Congress put aside political differences and do something to rebuild the country. It won't happen. Front page story and inside the New York Times titled The $2.7 trillion medical bill. A look at colonoscopies, explain why U.S. leads the world in health expenditures. The story points out that while the United States medical system is famous for drugs costing hundreds of thousands of dollars in heroic care at the end of life, it turns out there is a more significant factor in the nation's $2.7 trillion annual health care bill, and it may not, which may not be the use of extraordinary services, but the high price tag of ordinary ones. Colonoscopies offer a compelling case study. In some cases, the services can cost as much as $9,000. Covered by insurance, but an explanation of why insurance rates continue to go up. This morning, front page of the New York Times. Chris joining us from New Haven, Connecticut on our Democrats line. Good morning.
Good morning, Steve, and thanks for taking my call.
Certainly.
That New York Times article really hit the nail on the head, but I really was calling about passing the college loan bill so that young people are not saddled with incredible debt. But another way to go about it, I think, is we should have less emphasis on accreditation and more emphasis on people learning the information that they need. We now have the Internet and Khan Academy, and actually reminds me of Ben Franklin, who didn't have a college degree, didn't go to Harvard, but invented the lightning rod, which made him the most famous American in the world before the revolt. And I really think that it's incumbent on people to invest in their own educations. He had the Franklin Institute and the Young Men's Institute, one in Philadelphia, one in New Haven, which were for working people to have an education without the sponsorship of someone like their parents or someone else sending them to college. Working people could get an education on their own by studying with maybe a little bit of direction from a teacher at the institute. I really think that's the way to go. We've got the tools now. I can remember I had a 1932 edition of high school self-taught that my father had in the house, and I basically didn't have to read another book in high school that I didn't want to read.
Okay, Chris, thanks for the call. Appreciate your call and your comment. Joining us on this Sunday morning, Mark has this on our Twitter page. He says, sad, but Congress will waste time investigating the defined dirt for political gain. Congress is looking at the elections of 2014 and 2016. The President's space program and NASA is the cover story of P.J. O'Rourke from the Weekly Standard, titled Obama's Asteroid. And inside the editorial by Bill Kristol, calling it a low, dishonest administration. Bill Kristol, who joined us this past week on the Washington Journal, says it is depressing. We, the people, reelected Barack Obama. We're stuck with him for 3.5 more years. That's 3.5 more years of dissembling about his administration's scandals, blocking the repeal of Obamacare, and pursuing a foreign policy of weakness and retreat. But, says Bill Kristol, it's also an opportunity. House Republicans should be able to pursue their oversight responsibilities in a way that serves the public interest in checking a wayward executive while also making the case against a sprawling and unaccountable big government. Bill Kristol this morning in the Weekly Standard, out today. Next is Christy joining us from Oneonta, New York. Good morning, Republican line.
Good morning, sir. How are you?
I'm fine.
Good. I have one quick comment, and that is about the IRS. I believe they should be disbanded immediately. That display they gave when they testified to Congress was very, very shameful. Not one of them told the truth. We should go to the flat tax immediately and stop these power-hungry people from putting fear in the American people. Thank you very much.
Christy, thanks for the call. Chicago getting some attention from a couple of cover stories, including the New York Times Sunday magazine. The death and life of Chicago is the cover story. And in case you missed it from last Thursday, former Congressman and now Mayor of Chicago, Rahm Emanuel, with the cover story, Chicago Bull, fighting both crime and failing schools. So why are people mad at him? David Vondrelli has that piece this morning from the cover story of Time magazine. And inside the New York Times Sunday magazine is a look at some neighborhoods in Chicago stuck in the shadow of affluence, how the epidemic of empty foreclosed homes in Chicago's poorest neighborhoods ignited a new form of guerrilla activism. Again, that this morning from the Sunday Times, New York Times Sunday magazine, and Time magazine. Randy is next, joining us from Hyattsville, Maryland. Good morning, Democrats line.
Good morning. Thanks for taking my call.
Certainly.
First of all, I just want to send out my prayers to Oklahoma. If anybody could use government money, it is the people of Oklahoma. However, these are the people who probably rely more on their own initiative than on top-down bureaucracy. I'm a teacher, and I have.
What do you teach? What grade?
I teach social studies in high school, and I have often been paralyzed by the vast bureaucracy in the educational system, and I know that this extends to all levels of government.
Randy, let me stop you. Why is that the case? We've heard so often from teachers who complain about bureaucracy, paperwork, the standard of learning skills that are required and not allowing them to teach with any flexibility.
That the quality of teachers is slowly going down, and that the authority is being put into the hands of bureaucrats, not just in education, but I mean, in the case of all government agencies. It's very paralyzing.
Okay, Brandy, thanks for the call. Carolyn is joining us from York, Pennsylvania. Good morning. Welcome to the program.
Hi, good morning. Well, I hope when Congress gets back in session, they do something about the China buyout of Smithfield. I certainly don't feel good with China having a big footprint in their food supply. And I'm really upset with Congress because of the GM, all the money that we gave to that company, and now GM is going to spend $1.3 billion building a new Cadillac plant in China. That's our money they're taking over to China. I wish Congress would put restrictions on money when they hand it out to different companies. That's all I got to say. I'm really getting concerned about China, and I hope they do something.
Again, a meeting that will be taking place later this week between President Xi and President Obama in Palm Springs, California. Stella says this: callers want Congress to do what? Find more ways to raise taxes, continue insider trading, target people who dissent, and focus on corruption. You can join us on our Twitter page. It's Twitter at C-SPAN WJ. Next is Stephanie joining us this morning from Highland, California. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, C-SPAN. I just hope Congress come back and put all partisanship aside and work for the people and do the will of the people and protect the workers of the United States, of the Americans. And I'm really sick of all the partisanship, and I'm tired of the arguments and the bickering and the pointing of fingers. We just need them to work for us for a change, and so our country can grow and prosper. We need peace in our country, and I just hope they come back and they put all partisanship aside and do the will of the people and work for our best interests for a change. And the new mantra is, it's not the economy, it's our future, stupid. Thank you.
Stephanie, thank you. Ed O'Keefe of the Washington Post writing about a new report that was released late last week, or excerpts released. The full issue will come on Tuesday. But he points out the IRS spent an estimated $49 million on at least 220 conferences for employees over a 3-year span, beginning back in fiscal year 2010. That, according to this forthcoming report, that will prompt some fresh scrutiny on the already embattled agency. That story this morning inside the A section of the Washington Post. And James Warren, who is the Washington bureau chief for the New York Daily News, has this piece. It's available online on the Daily News website. Do the Washington, D.C. hustle. He points out, for the media, this is the dance of capital of America. As the disco ball spun, the attribution shuffle was performed last week amid a great kerfuffle. And this was much more than a mere spectacle, writes Jim Warren. It was a window into the ethically challenged culture that should battle normal citizens. The attribution shuffle is central to how the press operates here and its symbolic relationships with sources which produce many of the stories that you read, watch, and hear. It is a form of self-imprisonment, even self-delusion, driven by a craving for access to the powerful. The kerfuffle began with revelations of the Justice Department's decision to procure phone records and email accounts of reporters in separate investigations dealing with national security leaks. Jim Warren points out that many in the media were outraged, with some proclaiming that going after a reporter for soliciting classified information violates the First Amendment. But the bottom line for the Attorney General is that he was somewhat self-inflicted in this mini-mess on his own hands. He has been criticized by allies, not just headline-seeking congressional committees that are beckoning him for ritualistic browbeatings. So he extended the olive branch, offering to sit down with a variety of people interested in press and security issues, with the stated goal of recalibrating the Justice Department guidelines. The hitch: the meetings would be off the record. Again, you can read more. It's called How Do the Washington, D.C. Hustle. Jim Warren of the New York Daily News. Sandra is joining us from Winston-Salem, North Carolina. Democrats line, good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. I appreciate you having us on, but my comment this morning is that basically we've been going through a whole lot of dodgeball, a lot of distractions, and I want to see where our government get at a place where we honor the man that we put in office, but also not just with honoring him, but honoring the people's desires and their needs, because it's going to take all of us to rebuild America. It's going to take all of us to rebuild our infrastructure, but it's going to also take where we stop playing head games with each other and stop playing dodgeball and start putting our focus back on what's most important, and that's families. And those are the politics of this country that build this country, and that's families. And so as a result of that, we're going to always be distracted and doing opposite things and tearing each other down instead of building each other up. But the firmament is teaching us what's going to be most important, and we don't start getting a grip on what's most important, and that is loving each other, start getting rid of some of these issues like racism and power struggles and stuff, and start making cuts in the legislation as far as their monies, and they'll be able to understand middle class and what the people that really do put in the money into these government-funded programs and stuff really need.
Okay, Sandra, thanks for the call. And Jan has this point to our earlier caller from Hyattsville, Maryland, the high school social studies teacher. Her point about education: start with your local school board. They're the ones who hire teachers in your school. And an obituary we want to pass along to you in case you missed it over the weekend. Jean Stapleton, who passed away at the age of 90. The New York Times described her as a character who emboldened an emerging feminism. She also participated in a series of conferences on women's issues, and after All in the Family, she portrayed Eleanor in the one-woman stage production of Eleanor Roosevelt. She was described as somebody who received 8 Emmy nominations, won 3 times, and part of the political breakthrough of Norman Lear from the program All in the Family back in the 1970s. Jean Stapleton, who passed away at the age of 90. Coming up in the next